Well, my name is Garold Roach. I'm 6th of 12/47. I'm born and bred in Adamstown. I went to Adamstown Primary, and then I went to Cooks Hill High. And so I've never gone far from where I am. I'm currently living in Georgetown, so I don't like going too far out of my way. I virtually went from school. Actually, I went straight into a Christmas casual job in 1964, Christmas '64, and of all places, I was a Christmas casual at the Co-op store, and because that finished Christmas Eve, and I went the next step and went on Social Security, which was interesting back in those times. It was, you had to go into the offices up the top of town and every fortnight and pick up your small allowance that they gave you. I think it was about 35 shillings back then, or something like that. And then I think it was in March '65, I had a part-time job at J.O. Wild Cordials, which are no longer in business. But then I got a full-time job at Marcus Clark's in the Manchester department. So that's what started me in retail virtually then. And of course, Marcus Clark's went through a decline in '65 and '66. I'm not sure the exact year when they closed, but it wasn't long after I left in '66 and got a job at the Co-op store in the boyswear department. So that more or less set me up at that time. So it was a great place to be involved with. I had the opportunity to meet a lot of interesting people. Whilst I was there, I learnt the boyswear trade, which carries on to menswear. So. And that was big because school uniforms were massive back then, and I enjoyed that side of it. It became really a second life for me. I got the opportunity to go on the trainee management program at the Co-op store, which was supposed to be to introduce you to different aspects of the structure of the Co-op store, but I think in the time that system was running, that nothing really happened. I know it was after I turned 21 that I got the opportunity to. There was a position at Swansea branch for a section head, and I went out to Swansea and for just over 4 years. The section head at the time, Tom Wareham, he came in to the boyswear section because the current buyer of that section was George Meldrum. So Tom came in to learn the trade, that side of it from George, because George was going to retire. And when he did, the position of 2IC came up in boyswear, and at that time I was married and I was travelling from Georgetown to Swansea virtually 6 days a week, which was an interesting trip. But then the position of 2IC came up for boyswear. I applied for that and got that and came back to Hunter Street. And I was there up until the time that they needed a Manchester buyer, and they went around trying to find someone and finished up with me, and I decided to give it a go, and that's where I finished up as the Manchester buyer for the Co-op. And that I stayed there up until the last day. Even as a kid, I remember going into the Co-op store. And the thing I remember as a child was the red footsteps. Okay. Has anyone mentioned the red footstep?
No.
Now, there used to be back in the old section there, you used to walk through the front doors and they'd walk over to your left. There were some stairs leading up to the next floor, and the red footsteps were somewhere around there, and they led up there because when they used to have Santa used to be up in that section, and I think it used to be where next to the Allura Hall, because that's where the Manchester, I think, originally was. Because then it was all old style, timber shelving, wooden boxes in the shelves, and the wooden timber islands and panelling on the wall. But the red footsteps, I always remember them as a kid. No, it was a fun place to be. It's pity it's not there anymore. You know, the whole structure of Newcastle, I think, has disappeared to what I know Newcastle. In fact, I've lost the love of Newcastle. It's not there for me anymore because of what has happened at Newcastle. It used to be enjoyable to go into town. Now it's not. Back to the co-op. Well, the co-op was, once you got a job at the co-op store, it was like you were there for your lifetime there. It's because once you got a job there, it was a job. You became part of the family, and there's people there that started as young employees, and they stayed there and they went through and they rose up through the ranks, and I'd say a majority of those people have passed on by now, but I know the people that the ladies that I've worked with, Jean Eason, I'm pretty well sure she's passed on. Bonnie Voicey, they were my senior ladies when I first started. One of the most interesting people that I worked with was my boss, George Meldrum, who I think he was Scottish, and he knew products. He was the one that introduced me to product knowledge, how to look at materials, how to look at the fibres, what they comprised of, and that he taught that type of stuff, those skills, which you don't find now. There was some fascinating people, you know. But it was interesting to see the changes come through, especially with the first when they modernised the layout. So you went from the old shop look to the glass look. They expanded and they opened up and they gave more room to the department. So, for instance, boyswear used to be up near the front. You walked through the front doors, you went straight into menswear, the mercery section, and then used to have the island, which was the boyswear, and of course the suits and that were always down the back. I think dress fabrics were down where the escalators were, which was near the haberdashery. Men's footwear was down the back. So that particular section where we were, they were the main departments there. The only one that really moved away was dress fabrics when that went up to the first floor. And boyswear, we moved over to where the dress fabrics, and they gave us a massive big floor space area. And we actually had to move our stock basement reserve section back around to virtually it was underneath where the kitchenware used to be, which is the next wall over. I remember walking down to that particular basement when we were moving the stock down and looking at it, and at the back wall there was this chalk line. It was about 3 foot up the wall. And wondered about that for a while until I found out that that was sea level. So, because all under the Co-op store, you had wells sunk into the ground, and these were pumps. They had pumps on them. So, because that was all reclaimed land, that used to be originally swampland. So, you had the pumps, the wells sunk in, and the pumps. So, whenever it rained and the water level rose, the pumps would start up. But that chalk line at the back of the back wall was sea level. So, we were walking below sea level. So it was interesting. But, we had the branches. We had all the branches scattered around. And when I became company buyer, I got the opportunity, because a company buyer, you go around and you visit branches because your section had stock in most of the branches. So I got to see all the branches. And that was interesting, the little hidey holes at West Walls End. I remember the first time the boys whereby Tom was on holidays, and we'd just been asked to get involved with the Curry branch because they were in problems. So they sent representatives from each section up there to view the stock on hand and what they had. And that was very interesting because that was real old-fashioned country. I remember going down to looking at the stock, and then going down to they had a basement area for the stock, and I remember going down and checking the stock down there, and seeing a row of Chesty Bonds, boys' singlets. And I thought there was something strange because they had a pile of price tags, stickers, sitting on top of each one. So when they had a price increase, they didn't pull the old price. They just put a new one on. So when you peel back, pounds, shillings and pence. So if you want a pair of ladies' shoes from a particular area, they would have found it there. And I think the funniest thing from that branch that came out of it was they discovered a suitcase down in the basement area, tucked away. And in the suitcase, they found all these little plastic boxes with names on them. And it turns out that there used to be a funeral parlour, and these were the unclaimed ashes. So they've been put in a suitcase and put in the basement. So, little things like that, cropped up and all that type of stuff. But I remember, I think when I started in '66, I just missed out on the Beatles promotion, because they used to enjoy promotions, and they had the Beatles. So I came there at the end. All I saw when I started was a Beatles week, but I was there for the Monkeys promotion with their clothing range, when they brought out the hip huggers and the bell bottoms and the button front trousers that they wore. We had a big they used to love promotions. I remember once, I think they had New Zealand one week, so they had that going up, and the performers up in the Laura Hall. They got a stage set up. We had the Think Pink promotion. That was interesting. They used to have the fashion parades, and I remember once they had a haberdashery, because we were behind the haberdashery because that was the new setup. And I remember once they had a stocking demonstration, and I remember the models wearing shirts and long stockings. They were showing off the stockings, so there was interesting times like that. But you could get everything you want there. Everything was. I was brought up on the Co-op store by my grandparents. She used to take me in their school holidays. That was a trip for us. We'd go in, and there was an interesting part that I found in her old notebook about things like when I got my first car or when I started the store. And when I became Manchester buyer, she used to come in every second Wednesday to buy her washers or tea towels, because she used to crochet. So she still used to come in every second Wednesday and pick up a couple of washers to take home to crochet. And then that's my original share capital book, and that was the new one they replaced it in. I thought I had my grandmother's, but I haven't. But that's what they used to record, and that's the way I think the people at that time they grew up with that. The places like that, they slowly disappeared. My uncle used to work at Wynn's. He was a chef at Wynn's. They've gone. My other uncle he used to work at Coles. He was a pastry cook there, and because they had the cafeterias, and because they're all gone. So it's all changed. I know back with the when I was with the boys' wear and schoolwear, we had major retailers of schoolwear. We had the store, we had Rundle's, we had Thrifts at Charlestown, we had Lowe's, we had DJs and Wynn's. And I remember to make things a lot easier, because the amount of schools that were in the area and the uniforms, which became very involved, that they formed a schoolwear committee of the leading outlets so we could control them, because there's been instances where a parent didn't like a tunic because the daughter was a little bit full-figured and it didn't suit her, so she insisted that the school change the tunic, which meant that if they changed a tunic, all the shops that were carrying that tunic, and the girls' tunics were expensive, that they were left with them, which you can't do anything, you can't return them because they're already made items. So the schoolwear committee was formed, and they'd meet and discuss, and they would send representatives to the P&C associations to assist them with any inquiries about changes with the uniform, which was practical. So things like that that we were part of. It was back then. But that's all changed now. But it was a good period of time. And then we have our divvy days. Oh, they were fun periods and times. They were our big sale periods. You used to have them lining up at the door, waiting for us to open them, so they could rush up and get their divvy, so they could then come down and spend it. And they were full on. They were good times. It was interesting times. But yeah, they were magic moments. Until that was funny, because the store always had a policy that whenever they wanted to do something, or expand or buy something, I was led to believe they always paid cash. They always paid for something, they paid cash for it. And the dividend was always paid out of profits. And then the profits started to drop because you had changes in retailing going on. You had the supermarkets, shopping centre starting to start, really. So that was things. And they kept still paying a dividend out of their finance side. So when the profits weren't there, then they were still paying the dividend out. So virtually all the cash surplus went. And And I think that for a period of time there, they tried to modernise and they tried to compete against Coles and Woolworths in the food side of it. They brought in supposedly experts to achieve this. And they spent money and worked on, I believe, low margins. And it was a total disaster as far as those of us that were in the soft goods section. Now, the soft goods sections were fashion, were hardware, were haberdashery, the clothing side of it. The soft goods was always a section where their profit came from, because we worked on our margins, which everyone does. But they worked the other way around. They looked at bringing the people back into the supermarket side and leaving the soft goods alone. So I think that was what caused a lot of problems for the financial side of the Co-op store structure, which was disappointing because it was our second home. And if I went out anywhere with my wife and family and that, I wouldn't be talking about sport, I'd be talking about the Co-op store. So that was what I loved, that place. And I think when it closed, it was a difficult period. It took me a long while to get that Co-op store out of my system. And I think the hardest was trying to get a job and putting on your application previous employment company buyer, because by that time I think the word company buyer was something that people didn't associate with. So things like that. But it was disappointing, but there again. I think I've worked for a few places that are no longer in business. Yeah. J.A. Waddell Cordials, only worked there for a couple of days. Marcus Clark's. Newcastle Toys and Hobbies. They're gone. Co-op store, of course. Upper Mob, Rich Agencies, which was funny because Rich Agencies was a textile agent, and the warehouse was one of the old stationery buildings that were down the road near the railway station. So it was like walking in a place that I walked into all those years ago. So the Co-op store was home to most of it, and you had a great bunch of people. And of course, the upper people, the casuals. We had our permanent casuals that used to come in on a daily basis, that used to fill in while we were short-staffed or people on holidays, and they normally worked from 10 to 2, and they were moved around to different departments, but you still had your regulars. And then we had our Thursday night and Saturday morning juniors that were coming in, the schools, the kids and that, and they would do those times. So it was a lot going on. We had our home deliveries. We had everything there. We had our wholesale division down the road, CWS, which I think my Manchester department, we had our reserve stock on the top floor. We shared that with menswear and women's wear. So yeah, we did, because they had their hardware division there as well, because their hardware division used to do a lot with country stores. So that was why the CWS. So yeah, so that was fun. Having to push the barrow down there to pick up stock and blankets and all that. So bulky items. So so that was another aspect of the co-op, was that building. So but with the branches and that, you had a wide coverage, because it was the largest cooperative in the Southern Hemisphere. So there's a lot. And I don't think to this day that the only person that I ever run into after a couple of years after the closure was Philip, because he was the maitre d' at the Madison, and my daughter, when she got married, that's where they stayed. And I remember she got hungry and I had to go and get some McDonald's, and walked in the foyer, and here was Philip standing there. And that, I think, was about the last time I saw him. The rest of the people I work with, I don't know. They're all.
You mentioned quite a few different jobs that you had there, so if it's okay with you, I'd just like to ask you a few questions specific to those jobs. You mentioned that you started as a Christmas casual in 1964, so can you let me know what the atmosphere of the store would have been like, what your role would have been as a Christmas casual in 1964? Well,
I was just a junior, and I worked on the men's accessories, which was socks and leather goods, well, just the accessory side of it, handkerchiefs. And I remember a young guy across the road from, they gave me one of his old suits, which had to be altered, and it was still slightly big, but I wore that. And I was only there for about 4 or 5 weeks just for the Christmas period, but and it was funny because some of the people that I worked with when I came back there in '66 were working there. So I think Cole Campbell was in charge of that menswear section then, and of course he moved on to become one of the controllers, because we had 2 controllers there, George Tonks and Cole Campbell. And it was funny because Cole Campbell, his sister-in-law was Jean Eason, who was my senior when I started in boyswear. So that was interesting. Yes, that was interesting. So there was, and Cole's the one who, he went through and worked up. And but Orb Murray was. No, I met him after I started back in '66. Orb was he was down looking after the men's underwear and knitwear side of it. The Christmas casual, that was big news. You to get a first time job as a Christmas casual, especially when you've just left school, and that was it in that section. And handling cufflinks and wallets, key tags, they were all aftershave, and initial handkerchiefs. Mustn't forget initial handkerchiefs.
So what would the atmosphere of the store been like during that Christmas period?
It was always full on. Everyone was. It was difficult because I was only there for a short time, but the staff were friendly, and of course they took great delight in stirring up us juniors with sending us off to ask for stupid things in different departments. That was something that they liked to do with us, because we were only new Christmas casuals, fresh off the production line, and and that was. I remember that. Yes. There was a couple of things they sent me for that, being young and innocent and didn't know what they meant, but I found out that that was full on, and getting my first chance to write a docker book out, because everything was done by docker books, and right up until the end we had docker books. So that was Christmas was back then was magic. And for a first timer, the excitement of going to work and getting a wage, and then going home, because at that time I lost my mother when I was in 51, and my grandmother brought me up, and she became virtually my mum. And my grandfather, he passed away in 62, I think it was. So that was just basically the two of us. So to me, to bring home some money and say to her that there is something to go towards, that was a big thing. And to be able to buy her a Christmas present when we first, was, I remember that. And I remember what I bought her, flower whisker.
And from the store?
From the store, yes. I can't remember how much it cost, but that was it. I bought her that. That was the first Christmas present I'd ever bought her. And that came out of that Christmas casual job.
And so then you obviously progressed further with the story. You mentioned that you were part of their trainee management program. So I was just wondering if you could give me an idea of what that program entailed.
Well, it was supposed to have been where they selected I can't remember how many it was. It would have been between, I think it was about 5 of us maybe. And we were all in that young 20-ish year period. And the training management program, it was strange because I think they were doing, I don't know why they started it. Well, it was there, and I was led to believe that we'd be given the opportunity to move about within the store to work in different sections. So we'd be given the opportunity to go upstairs in the accounts, find out what goes on up there, move around to probably groceries, hardware, so that we could gain experience in the day-to-day operation of the store structure. I think we had a couple of meetings where they just outlined certain guidelines, and I think we were given some type of training manual. It never went anywhere with it. We were part of the program, but the program was just a paper thing.
It was just in-house.
It was just in-house, and I never moved away from the department I was in. I stayed where I was, and I think there might have been 1 or 2 training sessions, because they up on the top floor where they had training rooms up there. That was where the personnel was, which was right on that little tin roof building that was above the second floor. So I used to be able to remember what every school uniform and the colours were within our area. It was 300 odd, something like that. But,
wow.
Yeah, because we used to keep a card index system with all that information on, because come January and back to school, boys' wear was and girls' school wear was where everything happened. We virtually were flat out for 3 to 4 weeks, like January, virtually all January. Once you got through New Year, and that, it was full on, and we were flat out 6 to 7 people. Back then we had 1, 2, 3, 4. We had 6 staff, and then we'd have casuals coming in, and we had them 2 to 3 deep sometimes at the counter, and you used to have to try to serve more than one customer at a time. So otherwise you've got a stern look from the senior ladies, why can't you handle more than one customer? So because, you had to get them fitted, you had to sort it all out, and of course had to write up the docket books. That all took time, but and you could never take holidays in January. Not our section, because we were needed, because that was for us it was busier than Christmas. It was full on. The adrenaline pumps, because when you're busy and when you're flat out and you're just moving from one customer to another, the adrenaline is blowing and it's full on. You just don't slow down. It eats away at you, and you're just on a high. You're buggered, but you're on a high. But they were full on times, and it kept on. It never at that time in January. It was great when they all went back to school, and then everyone had their uniforms. But the blazers and sports shorts and getting all that type of stuff. So that was fun. That was fun.
And so you mentioned that you progressed to the 2IC in boys' wear.
Yep.
What kind of duties did you perform as the 2IC?
I was second in charge of boys' wear, so I was responsible to keep an eye and make sure the department functioned so that the buyer, Tom, could do what he needed to do as far as buyer. He was still on the counter. He still served, because we had the roster system, so he would take one half of the roster, I'd be on the other half, so that there was two seniors there at any one time. So the layout stock, we'd work together on that, and Tom and I did work together. It was a good team. He had the gift. He could talk people into anything, and I was his backup, because you could ask me to do something, get something, and I always used to be able to do it. And it was just keeping an eye, making sure, lunch hours, morning teas. So basically, I was there to assist the buyer, and I was just his second in charge. So when he wasn't there, things fell on my shoulders. So he was off, or there was something happening, or I remember the first time I wanted to advertise something, and I'll fill out the form, and I'd never filled one out before, and that was interesting. But it happened descriptive of the product that you're advertising. So and then you fill out your form to get your signs for your pricing. So you get your form, and then you go across to the art section, to the girls over there, and they so they could make up your price tags. And the girls that are over there in the art, they used to double up as models for their fashion parades. Yeah, and they used to do a lot of that down on the ground floor, because they had the cosmetic section there, and down between where the two lifts were, there was a set of stairs, and that's where our original basement was for boys' wear, and that's where the girls used to get changed. And I remember once I was going down there to get some stock for an item for a customer, and I walked down, I put one foot down on the bottom step, and I went to turn left to go down to the passage, and the girls had got there early, and they were starting to change, that caught me out, because after that they put one of the guys on the top of the steps to say, "No, you're going to go down there." But that was something that was just, you didn't know. Yeah. I used to have lunch down there in the basement because it was a quiet area, and because you had an hour lunch then, which was good. And I remember once sitting down there and I'm reading my book and had my lunch, and I thought, I better get back. And I went to go out, I went to the door, and of course the girls were there again, which I hadn't realised. So I had to ring upstairs to the department and ask the ladies and tell them I was trapped down in the basement and I couldn't get out because the girls were changing.
Run me through a day in the life of a Manchester buyer at the store.
Well, again, I was the buyer, but I was also a shop assistant. So I'd be representatives of different companies would either ring up, make an appointment, come in and see me, show me the product range, and I'd look at that to see if there's items there that I wanted to buy. And then in between that, I'd be doing what any other staff member would do. I'd be serving at the counter, working on customers, pricing. I'd be even cleaning, stacking, going down to the warehouse to check stock in, to unpack. So we still, all the buyers still done all that type of stuff. So it was hands-on. You were the buyer, but you were also a shop assistant.
Which I imagine enabled you to keep in contact with your customers and know what they wanted and expected as well too.
Yeah, well, that plus the fact that you couldn't have buyers just sitting in a room all day waiting for someone to come in to see them. So, and again, the cost of paying staff was a major factor as well. So I think there were a couple of buyers that had separate offices down in the back row, which was on the first floor. There was a range of offices down there, which were the controllers and I think the display section, they had a set up there, I think, as well. And I know my Manchester department, that was next to the general manager's room and the boardroom. So, and the store manager's room. So they were there. My Manchester department was along that. We faced out our out of Under Street. The windows. We had a wall which screened off the front windows, and behind that I had a bit of a stock room. So I could open the windows up and look out and look at Under Street, look at the old brewery, and watch people line up at the company buyer side. We got the trip to go to, you go to Sydney on catch the train, to go down for the day to look at things to buy. And we also, as company buyers, we every 4 or 6 weeks, a group of us would get in a car and we'd go out to a particular branch to check on the products that we were were in that branch that came under our control. So you'd be driving around all those branches, which was interesting because I got to see where all the branches were, and walking into some of them was interesting. It was like walking back into a bygone era. So yeah, it was funny. The first time I had to go back to my old branch, the Swansea branch, where I was a section head. That was interesting to check to see whether any of the things that I'd done out there was still there or not. Again, like with the branches, you had a section head because everything was in sections. So you had your hardware section, you had your ladies' wear section, the men's and boys' wear section, and you had the grocery section. So you had a branch manager, and then you had your key figures in each of those, and they either had a single staff member under them or a casual. So when I started out there, I had a full-time staff member, and which came in handy because when we started the Thursday night shopping and went under a roster system, that became important, so that you had a permanent staff member to cover the days when you're not, and then they'd bring in a casual to if needed be. So, but most times when it got down to just me as the single person to run menswear, boyswear, we used to, if we wanted a morning tea or lunch break, we'd sing out and they would send probably somebody from the grocery department over to relieve you. So that the times when you weren't there, like Thursday night and Saturday mornings, they'd bring in a young casual to look after things. If I was working either of those, Thursday night or Saturday morning, I'd have a casual to fill in for me while I'd be in another section of the store. And the branches, everyone knows everyone, because a lot of the branch people were locals. So you only had those few odds and ends that were living further away. So I know.
So what did Swansea branch sell compared to head office? What kind of stuff would you have been able to buy at Swansea, and what kind of stuff would you had to have travelled into head office to?
Well, the big ticket items weren't there. So it was more for the local. It was like putting you had ladies' fashion, which covered haberdashery, hosiery, underwear, the dress side of it, shoes, and they on that side, the Manchester. Then you had the menswear, boyswear, which covered clothing, footwear. Then you had the hardware section. Now the hardware section, that covered kitchenware and stationery, and we had a bit of music there as well, LPs. And then it was basically hardware with the paint section and all your hardware related items. And of course then you had your grocery section, which was a checkout like a small supermarket. They had the deli and all your grocery items. So basically that was, the branches were basically all set on that. The only one that was, most branches had that all in one roof. I think Belmont was split over two. They had the grocery section down the corner where the old traffic lights are, and the soft goods side was up the road on the hill on the opposite side. So they were separated, and they were probably that was a small side of it, but the majority of the other ones were set up so that you had everything in there. So the big ticket items like white goods and furniture was impossible to carry, and that was in the big store, that was there, and people could go in there and get it, and we had our own delivery system. So they could deliver anything they did. Well, it was so far along. It was only that the Think Pink always stuck in my mind. And there was an award given for that. And it used to be, they used to display that out the front on the wall near the main lift. And I can't remember the wording. It was a Pink Think Award, yes. The Think Pink promotion. And I don't remember anything much about it, apart from the Think Pink was stuck in my mind.
The other one you mentioned was the Beatles and the Monkeys promotion. So
that was clothing, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when a promotion was going on in the store, is that when you'd have the windows and you'd have marketing and you'd have obviously the products? What did a promotion entail?
It depends on what the products were, but for the boyswear side of it, it was because the Monkeys were, that was their heyday. They had everything going, and of course fashion played a part in everything, to capture the young people's imagination. Buy some Disney kids' sheets and pillowcases and towels, and where I got them from, they gave me a massive big 6 foot high Mickey Mouse. So I just had they set that up on display with some of the products around it, and it was just an in-house display, just to draw people in and, buy the product and put your docket in the box and go in the drawer to win this big 6 foot high Mickey Mouse.
Thinking back to Divvy Day, how would, as the Borough of Manchester, and how would you have prepared for Divvy Day? Did you buy an extra Manchester? Did you buy an special?
Yes, we had specials. We had specials going on because that was a selling period. That was a big selling period for the store. It was income. So, of course, yes, you'd have store-wide specials, just like they do today with all the ads that are going on. Yes, we'd have full-page spreads for all departments would be involved, because that was it. The people would be coming in, and they were there. They would flock in. They would come in because you had to come into the main branch to get your dividend. So you couldn't go out to the small branches and get it. You had to come into the main branch, and so you'd have the girls from upstairs in the office. They'd come down because they'd have the tables set up, actually near Manchester. So you'd see them all coming in. I think they did have it upstairs at one time, but I know they did have it down in front of the Manchester. They'd moved part of the furniture away because the furniture department was there in front of me, and they'd set up the tables, and you'd go to where your initial was and with your book, and they write up what you had in it. So you could either go up and get your share of your money, get your money and spend it, or go from there. But they were big sale days. But yes, we had our special. Yeah, they're the days that they'd be waiting outside for those front doors to open, and you'd see them race in, and you'd see them race up. They'd go through the front doors, and they'd either go right to go up the stairs or on the lifts, or they go straight to the escalators, or they'd come running through. So, because let's face it, ladies' footwear was very popular, and if they had specials on footwear and clothing for the ladies, they were up there. Yes.
Now, given that you started the store in 1966, I just wanted to ask you what you remember about the whole pounds to dollars. How did that affect your employment at the store? How did the store handle
I was already in decimal currency. I started at Marcus Clark's in 65, and we were pounds, shillings and pence then, and I went through all the decimal currency training at Marcus Clark. So I was already involved with the decimal side of it. There would have been in-house training, because you had to know the conversion rate so that you would be able to you'd be able to charge the customer the right amount and tell them what it was worth, and that it was, yeah. So it was interesting because the slight variation between the currency, but once you got used to it, it was straightforward. I think it was a lot easier to add up in 10s rather than 12s, I think the weight difference was more noticeable, because when you handled the pennies and the halfpennies as against the 1 cents and 2 cents, the weight difference was very noticeable. With the Manchester department, had this box barrow. It was about 5 foot by about 3 foot, a couple of wheels on it, and it used to be down, hidden away in a little floor, and that's what we used to use to walk down the couple hundred metres to get to CWS, which I think was Cooperative Wholesale Society. So I don't know all that much about it, because in its heyday it was very big, because it was a wholesale division. So they used to do a lot with the country outlets. So that little hardware store tucked away out the back of wherever, they had a place where they could buy the hardware items wholesale. So it was like, I suppose in a funny way, it was like being able to walk into a Bunnings and seeing a massive row of products on the shelf, which were there so that these little businesses could come in and buy it. It's just like it's a big wholesale, a big warehouse, and they had their own management structure down there for that particular side of it, and I think they had something to do with the. I think they may have had something to do with the bakery and that, because I think Clyde Street had the bakery section out there. So and I think that was all under that, because it was all separated to the Newcastle Co-op site. So you had the cooperative wholesale, because the bread, I think they used to produce and sell bread as well. Because they had the tokens, the bread tokens. Yeah. And I actually had one of those little boxes that they used to keep the tokens in. Yeah, but that was another side of it as well. So yeah, but that was the first to close at the CWS. That was the first to go. Yeah.
So it was independent of the store. It wasn't actually part.
It was part of the store, but it was independent.
But it sold specifically to other wholesale.
Yeah. It was part of the store, but it was completely separated from what else. I think it's a storage place now. I think, because it was Dairy Farmers Corner.
How would you compare shopping now in those departments to shopping in those departments in the 1960s and 70s?
The range of products is not there. The range of Manchester has been considerably cut back to a basic range of merchandise. You had a massive variety of products available, especially with the Manchester. It was covering a lot. You had a big range of towels, bedspreads, soft furnishing side for that, which I had for a short period, thank God. I didn't like doing any measuring and on that side of it. In the simple things like face washes, tea towels, all those type of things. Blankets, like back then, wool blankets were honka paringa, and you had to have woolen blankets on your bed. When I came into Manchester, the eider-down quilt was just starting to come in, and I saw the benefits of that product in preference to woolen blankets. So the eider-down became warm without weight. That was a key selling point. In fact, I actually upset the honka paringa buyer by cutting back on his expected order he expected a massive big order for wool blankets. But I saw the decline in woolen blankets back then. And I remember him going down to see the controller that I was responsible for, because they were mates. And next thing I know, I had the controller up and he told me to give that rep an order for blankets, which I did because I did what I was told. But I remember that time, and that was one of the things that wool blankets went and quilts came in, and they're a much better product. But the range to what we used to sell then, it's nothing to what is available now. You have a basic, if you look at what's on the shelf these days, it's nowhere near to what used to be available. Same again with clothing, and like with fashion, it changes, and you have products that come in on a cycle, but there is a lot of products there that are not available. You look at ties. I used to have, I had so many ties that I couldn't remember which one when I last wore it. But you look at what's available in ties today. Initial handkerchiefs. I don't think I've seen any of them. You're pushing to try to find a pack of handkerchiefs these days. So even underwear's changed. Like that whole aspect. The only thing that I think has stayed. There's two things that have stayed in fashion. That's denim and Hawaiian shirts. I remember when Hawaiian shirts came back in. That was at the same period when the denim boom hit, which was in the around about the mid-70s, and denim became more popular, and they set up the denim shops in the menswear section down the bottom where the suits and that, they set up a special area for just the sale of denim products. In boys wear, we had our own denim racks as well. So, you had the big names, Leisure Master, Amco, Levi Strauss, Wrangler. They spent a lot of money on advertising. They were in all the department stores. They were on their front door pushing denim. It was to do with the denim and music. So you had all the pop music because denim, young people. We had girls coming into the boys' wear and menswear section to buy denim jeans. The only trouble is that in those days the men's and boys' fashions were more up on the waist, and the girls wanted to wear them on the hips. So, and of course the fits weren't exactly suitable for some of the forms.
And what about the service aspect? Do you see a difference between service now and service back in your ADO store?
You had someone you could walk up to and get service at the counter. There was always somebody there. These days you've got to walk around and find someone to serve you. We dealt with service back then. We were a one-on-one. You would talk to the customer. You'd have your regulars come back. You still get that to a period of time, because I when I'm doing grocery shopping, or even when I'm going to get me cappuccino from my favourite coffee shops, those people, like at the coffee shops, that's where you still get your one-on-one. You're a regular there, they know you, you can talk to them. This is what it used to be like back then. So that is one of the areas that still goes on.
The social side of the store, did you participate in the store on stage, the store picnics? Did you ever get involved in any of those extracurricular activities?
I was not an entertainer. I was quite unassuming, shy, standoffish, wouldn't say boo or good morning to anyone. And no, I think I did go to, they did have a dinner one time in the Laura Hall where all the staff turned up. And I remember we sat around, the group of us from our particular area, that was menswear, boyswear in the main. We sat around and we were looking at the meat, and for some reason we started to say moo, because the meat was still pink and moving, because they had the Christmas choir. Every year we had the choir, and they'd stand on the escalator and do their carols. Mm-hmm. That was always, and of course it was on the escalator on the ground floor. The boyswear department, even before we shifted and after we shifted, still had that view. Yeah, so
they'd just sing carols and things.
they done the carols and the Christmas carols. I can't remember if they'd done any other ones or not, but I mainly remember the Christmas carols.
Now, what do you feel that the store meant to the community, to the wider community of Newcastle?
It was an institution. It was a local institution that people grew up with because it had been there for, I can't remember the year it started, but I think it's got its century up or something, I think, didn't it?
18,
Yeah,
19,
something like that. And, you know, as I said, I was brought up with it, and my grandparents, it was there. It was your shop. It was, you were part of it because you were a member of the co-op store. You had shares in the co-op store. Everyone had shares. If you had a token, you had shares in the co-op store. You became a shareholder because they had their that's brought the community. So you had the shareholders meeting every year, and they'd talk about whatever. I never went to one, but that was it. It was where you were, and of course, you know, you had your Laura Hall, you had the milk bar, you had, you know, you'd come in there and have your lunch. You know, we'd go up, we'd have our morning tea up in the Laura Hall, we'd have our lunch up there. You had a separate section in the dining room for waitresses to look after you, or you just had your serve self. But for the community, it was the place. It was, as I said, you were a shareholder. That made you a part of it. Sat down and away you went.
And do you have any thoughts on the demolition of the building? Do you perceive that as a good thing or a bad thing? Or
I think it's a bad thing because that building itself, I could see so many possibilities with that building. The structure of that building was there, and if somebody had the foresight to get that building and turn it into something like it would make, you had the ground floor structure for shops, which they tried to do. You had parking station there, which you could do. You could have turned that in. The Elora Hall was a function centre. They used to have weddings, receptions and everything there. That stopped. That could have kept on going. That could have been done. They could have turned that into that first floor into an entertainment venue area. They could have done so much with that building, and they didn't. Because with the kids, we used to have the window displays and the Christmas themes, which used to be fantastic every year. There was a period, something to do with a grotto, and there was something up on the second floor where the medical centre and the accounts office and the credit union and everything used to be. And of course, you used to have your little stairway used to go up to personnel. And I'm pretty well sure at one time there was some thing for the kids up there. It was some type of grotto. I can't remember the theme. I was working in the main store at the time, and it was only ever happened once, I think, but that might have been it. But it was some form of type of grotto thing where I think they built something that you could walk into, but I can't remember and that I didn't know I had this. This was a surprise. But that was my termination.
Administrator appointed in liquidation.
Yep. That administrator, oh yeah. Remember when we got called up to the administrator, we had a meeting of all the buyers, and we were in the boardroom, and we had to go through on our first major reduction of stock to try to get money back in, and we had to go around all the branches and work out and take a depreciation of stock that we need to sell to clear to bring money in. And I remember I was the first one picked, and I'd estimated that I had about $30-something odd thousand in it was going to be lost in stock to get money back in. And because I was the first one picked, and I think I had the biggest amount, because for me, if you're going to reduce something, you've got to be realistic, and you've got to not knock off 10 cents, you've got to knock it, because it's there to be cleared. So you've got to be savage, and that's what I've always done. If I'm looking at, I'm a scrounger, so if I'm looking at stuff, I'm looking at stuff that can be reused. And I also look at an item, if it's no longer can be usable, you scrap it, you get rid of it. And I've carried that right through with all the jobs that I've had, and I've been involved with purchasing right up until I retired. So I've always been involved with products and that's where my memory from learning school uniforms has come into play, because I got known as the guy that could remember where the products came from and where to get them.
So if you could think of just one thing, then what do you think would be the lasting legacy of the store? What do you think that the store, even though it's no longer here, left behind for Newcastle as a result of it?
I think it was just a unique setup as itself. The co-ops were an integral part of any community or any city. It was a place that you could rely on to walk in to get anything at any time. It introduced so many people to the workforce and to the job, and gave people the opportunity just to live. As I said, I took a long time for me to get over the fact that the store had closed, because I thought, like so many others, that you were set, and a lot of people had that opportunity to be able to do that. But there's a lot of us that didn't have that opportunity. But again, it was the times they are changing, and they didn't change with the times. And there was just another part of Newcastle that is gone, but to a lot of us, it'll never be forgotten. The best sausage roll was the ones that you got from the round and the pastry section, because they were the best sausage rolls, and they were really nice. You know, like you always had a good cuppa up at the Aurora Hall, but things like that. The basements and running up and down the stairs. When I started there, I was very slim, 31-inch waist, and I weighed nothing. I used to run up and down those stairs to the basement so many times a day, getting stock, bringing them up, or running up to the other floors. So all these jobs that I had in the retail side of it was stairs involved. So I kept my weight down beautifully. So I remember going up the Aurora Hole just one lunch break just to watch the Maori dancers when they had the New Zealand promotion, and my wife bringing the kids in to see me, in both when I was in Boysborough and in Manchester, and then them running up to see me as little kids then, because Dad worked at the store. Those little things, those memories, they're there. They're there. It's, as I said, it was the family. It was for me. It was my family.